Challenging inequality is everyone's business. Be the difference. I am Dr. Laura Chapman, but please call me Mole. Today's presentation. This presentation can help with a supported conversation about leadership, equality, and diversity and inclusive practice with a view to organizational change. Currently, from a professional perspective, many of us face ethical decisions on a daily basis, whether from a personal perspective or within our working roles. Our daily activity has an impact far beyond the organization in society. It seems that our companies are contributing far more to social inequality than we would like to acknowledge. On sustainability, to quote Naomi Klein, "What can I do as an individual?" She says, the first thing is to stop thinking of yourself as an individual. So you're likely to be far more influential and really come into your full capacity if you connect up with others. So if you work in a company, try and transform that company. If you're senior within a company, then try and transform your institution. If you're the head of an institution, then team up with other institutions and try and shift the whole narrative of society and so on. Today I use Kahane's ideas to articulate the tension between power and love, to explore a few of the many challenges of leading in practice and policy. Because sadly, we do not view community action as leadership activity. What is currently understood as leadership in common terms is loud speech, personal heft, and visibility, but not values-led questioning and moral strength, power and love. Today's session. I would like to explore the tensions brought by the challenge to balance power and love. The precarious position we between small and big picture, reconciling groups, them and us, articulating prejudice, discrimination and inequality, understanding alternative views, and being aware of legislation and an social justice imperative. I talk not of sentimental romantic love, but a tangible positive regard for humanity, a wish to see others flourish. What Barry Schwartz calls an application of professional wisdom that aims to better the lives of others. I ask, what happens when we care enough to articulate love in our work? When starting with our own jobs, within our teams, we go further to acknowledge a shared power, using an understanding of our community's knowledge critically. I conclude that leadering needs congruence, a balance in the tensions between love and power. As Sergio Vanni suggests, it's a movement of head, heart and hand together, so that we can stand against what is wrong in the world. It's a way of being that is far more likely to stand against prejudice, discrimination, and inequality. Viewed as balanced leadering brings us to articulate the tension between power and love that drives our passion for justice. Equality and diversity and inclusive practice, research and knowledge. For over 2 decades, well 3, I have explored the rights of marginalized groups. My PhD research explored legitimacy, that is the organizational response to the voice of the civil rights movement. I used conversation as a measure of accountability. The way I read it, leadership is about action, not position. Therefore, I use leadering here to suggest both direction and movement. I am leadering on this, I'm not a leader. I became aware in my work with professionals that disability is rarely mentioned in strategic conversation. It tends to be viewed as a personal problem and an operational concern. An ideal for organizational accountability was informed by well-being, disability equality, social justice, and human rights literature. Unintentionally, it appears, an organization's impact on the disabled population is largely unaccounted for, not told or costed, and the specific systemic inequalities affecting the population are rarely spoken of as leadering. I am not a fan of giving leadership an epithet. I think those who act with courage, moral purpose, and in inspiring, transformational, quiet, imperfect, dynamic, and fierce ways are all part of strategic change. To me, leadering means being in the moment, continually addressing an imperfect status quo. In introducing leadership as a state of being whole, Sergio Vanni puts forward the idea of a congruence of head, heart, and hand all working as one. The head holds the theories of practice and ideas that inspire change. The heart holds the beliefs, hopes and values that make up vision. The hand is our action, our movement, activism and ways of working. I use leadering, the being in every situation, where we are challenged to bring them together. Positively, if not easily, or fluently, but with a degree of momentum. From mindscapes to landscapes. We would be foolish to assume that it's easy to achieve a fair society. If it was easy, we would have cracked it. We would all live in an equitable world. The stories we tell are shaped by implicit distortion, if not for explicit gain. See green and business washing. Where communication is intended for public view, a company's tale can be worded for those beyond its walls, often boasting a value narrative poorly reflecting community values, things not people. Rarely are organizational accounts co-authored, offering a shared narrative including community voices equitably. Organizational stories rarely challenge cultures, as they omit the tensions that silence, gatekeep knowledge, mold ideas, or silence diverse voices within our workspace. Unwittingly, therefore, they tend to echo more mainstream storytelling, one that denies group experience, specific sensitivity, and trustworthy knowledge. How do we share the challenges of tension? By changing personal practice, or department policy, or organizational culture maybe. It's hard to say exactly what may not bring about world change. But growing evidence suggests the bigger the group, the more pronounced its probable impact will be on locality. Therefore, ethically, don't we have a personal duty to take action in order to unlock community movement that changes culture? Overall tension, power and love. To articulate balance, I draw on Kahane's ideas of power and love, by stating what needs to be both probable and desirable. The love part speaks to a force for good, a positive regard for humanity. Where love is the other acknowledging, other respecting, other helping drive that reunites the separated. The power is a strength to acknowledge and stand against inequality in the bigger picture. Because leadering that doesn't aim for better with intentionality is no leadership action at all. A flawed assumption, unlike mistakes, is an important distinction here. Action that doesn't acknowledge probable impact on organizational, institutional, and societal change is not strategic. This doesn't mean that what does unintended harm is wrong, so much as activity devoid of strategic impact has no power or love. Such activity may be only a show of muscle, abuse of force, loud voices, or acres of wordage aimed at getting seen. Sadly, it seems we're drawn to the charismatic in times of crisis. Assumptions trump what we believe, pun intended. According to Kahneman, we're often unable or unlikely to think deeply when we're stressed or anxious, so we rely on stereotypes and act with prejudice in times of crisis. Tension, we and they, civil rights groups and culture. It is not up to individuals from marginalized groups to be more fluent about their experiences of rejection and disadvantage. The onus is on those leading to address discrimination. The tension challenge is to understand the nature and harm imposed through culture. Because its impact on those experiencing inequality is traumatizing, the experience need not be asked of each individual. They may not have words. The evidence can be found within growing forests of texts. Trying to articulating which groups are most disadvantaged by organizational activity is a good place to start. Naming that they're not included in the way of daily living. Acknowledging that difference is missing in our workplace is a far bigger job than most believe. Truth is the problem of exclusion is greater than a lack of individual fit, since many of those rejected by organizational culture have no less experience, skill or wisdom. As Schwartz suggests, professional wisdom means knowing all types of individual have been accommodated somewhere, yet it still seems barriers are still substantial, because variation means practice is patchy. People from marginalized groups still face far greater barriers than most imagine. For those leading, the challenge is therefore to sit in the tension between what we do and what we could do, in order to benefit those currently denied a welcome and serving the wider community equitably. Sustainable Development Goals. Tension, Globe local. Countless examples hit our screens daily, decisions affecting many unfairly, often imposing inhumane conditions on the hardest hit. The threefold risk experienced by disabled people during the current COVID-19 pandemic results from a greater risk of negative outcomes from the disease itself, a greater risk of reduced access to routine healthcare and rehabilitation which differentially affects them, and the damaging impacts of policy, strategy, and planning efforts to mitigate the pandemic. For many years, groups of activists, those opposing sexism, racism, classism, homophobia, have drawn our attention to hate crime, discrimination, societal disadvantage, and global inequality. You'll be aware of the Me Too campaign and the Black Lives Matter movement. As a group within this movement, disabled people and deaf and disabled people's organizations have fought for the rights of the disabled population for half a century. More specifically, they're mobilized on a shared list of interests. Unlike some charities and research which have focused on single issues or perceived problems, often problems defined by clinicians or researchers acting on their assumptions about a named group's lived experience. As Klein says, slavery wasn't a crisis for British and American elites until abolitionism turned it into one. Racial discrimination wasn't a crisis until the civil rights movement. Sex discrimination wasn't a crisis until feminism. Apartheid wasn't a crisis until the anti-apartheid movement. This shows how important the voices from each community are to highlighting the challenges each group faces. We are facing an ethical crisis when we ignore those most disadvantaged by existing practice and policies, yet these won't change without specific challenge from those disadvantaged by them. Tension, more or less inequality. As Wolf states, health inequalities have risen since the inception of the NHS. Given present inequality, its impact on disadvantaged groups, can we even talk of our work as a power to show respect towards individuals, groups, and localities? Taking time to speak of inequality and disadvantage makes conversation more nuanced. As we speak of our actions which impact on the world more widely, our voice, a response, and accountability not solely to those within our organizations but to those in the space beyond them. Being able to articulate the challenges faced by some, but not others, demonstrates our intent and commitment to those most in need. We can't change the world, but stating the inequality within it. A statement of recognition equals the expression of our love. If working groups do not reflect the diversity of the communities they serve, who gets to challenge the harm imposed on marginalized groups? Having to really think about the impact of strategic decisions really challenges our assumptions about equality. Are we putting the power of the organization to everyone's benefit equitably? Tension, alternative voice and equal measure. As research suggests, strategic approaches are rarely equitable or measured fairly. Testimonial evidence suggests a need to focus on more than one characteristic. Because if we pick, say, classism, without also addressing religious intolerance, we fail many because in some areas people of Muslim faith are working class. Clearly, the cumulative effect of group identity is also likely to impose more hardship on those facing most discrimination and greater disadvantage overall. An organization wishing to represent its human rights imperative can choose to state the interests of a marginalized population within its accounts by making them explicitly within its storytelling, while keeping its integrity and purpose. This articulated responsibility will provide a more trustworthy account of any dialogue with a named group. If the dialogue is skewed, say people with certain identities silences, then the population is misrepresented. Only those with a recognizable authority will be heard. The organizational account is only of a legitimate dialogue, articulating equity explicitly, where a shared decision about interests and fair participation in stewardship has been made. Very few organizations will achieve this intentionally. In matters of equality and diversity, therefore, experience, self-knowledge and professional education guides us on work needed. Less a search for opposites to identifiers, make this female, more resistance to the oppression weighing on each group, facing ableism. This is far from a fanciful request, as the imperative to address inequality is also a legislative duty. Tension, strength and criticality. Stronger together, to quote Putnam, is to have more power as a team and to for our challenge to reach beyond our roles. More than a network, community implies mutuality and heart. From the French words for shared and united, unites communes, community implies a spirit of public responsibility. Applied to equality, diversity, and inclusive practice, this means the addition of minoritized voices, the interests of the civil rights movement. The shared, yet unique voices of activists, anti-racists, feminists, queer activists, anti-classists, and anti-ableists. Undoubtedly intent is key. The challenge is to resist the easy assumptions of same share, in order to demonstrate both our love for diversity and our power to create a community space. Individuals within civil rights groups may then be more willing to raise their voices against the violence they experience. In order to resist injustice, their power against the status quo, love of those disadvantaged. Tension, balancing the personal and the public. Introduced as a state of being whole, or wholehearted, Sergio Vanni puts forward the idea of leadership action as the congruence of head, heart and hand. In the moment, moving in ways that bring ideas, hope, and values that help shape vision. Leadership action is every situation in which we are challenged to bring together head, heart and hand, if not easily, or fluently, with a degree of congruence. I have used this idea to frame the implications of accountability, being and doing, with knowledge, wisdom, and willingness in practice. In opposing injustice, leadership activity aims to lessen the inequality that hits the disadvantaged the hardest. Just any effort isn't sufficient. Practice needs to be with the right effort and have a deliberate direction. While good, best and proactive practice sometimes equate, when operational is strategic, it is rarely unintentional. Because being better at treating people unfairly will rarely achieve more equitable outcomes. Practice might need to change to avoid the very activity that compounds the structural discrimination and inequality experienced by so many. Addressing power, especially that ill-used, means different actions are required at individual, team and organizational levels as acts of love. In a metaphor for accountability, Cami the chameleon epitomizes an intentional intent within organizational purpose in everyday practice. As suggested by Sinclair's writings, the idea of a chameleon serves well because, as a reptile that can change its colors to represent its surroundings, as the picture illustrates, the beastie still manages to clearly display the colors of others without changing itself as a being. Resolving tension, seeking a legitimacy. A shorthand for lack of accountability, the legitimacy gap, is often a prejudiced or biased response, a reaction to myth, rather than acknowledgement of voice. The legitimacy gap refers to the amount organizational storytelling differs from the interests of marginalized groups. Because professionals tend to overvalue their personal experience rather than attempting to address their assumptions with evidence or working wisdom of others, them and us. In accounts, more typical voices are louder than divergent ones, so that ideas are more readily accepted if supported by a wider narrative, however prejudiced. We seem happier to tell, and retell, our side of the story. Those with power, who acknowledge the significance of equality, can more ably respond in both personal, organizational, and public conversations by talking of barriers, discrimination and injustice with nuance. Pragmatic equality, or justice for marginalized groups, requires that discrimination does not add to the other hardship in the world. Another way of thinking about it, according to Wolff, might be to say that a world that is pragmatically equitable in respect of groups should contain the same degree of inequality between people as there is between individuals that are not marginalized in society. To lead it is everyone's responsibility, and therefore to sit between perfection and overwhelm. Whelming in the duty to do enough to deepen and widen understanding, while not drowning in guilt and feelings of powerlessness. Leadering. From an organizational perspective, accountability is a legitimate storytelling that tells of organizational life with a degree of authority, including voices of professionals, research community, and individuals within the locality. Accountability is demonstrated in the willingness to hear with heart and respond with care. The deviation gap or greenwashing is evidenced when individual or group denies experience they will not acknowledge. For example, when pain is dismissed in the hearing of racism, voices are silenced as individuals' difficult behavior, denying structural discrimination. Think #MeToo #BLM. Furthermore, where communication is intended for the public, the organizational tale can be explicitly worded for those beyond its walls. Legitimate tales will be those which do not omit challenging truths, however unique or uncomfortable. A telling that seeks instead to honor shared voices. If not co-authored, offering a shared narrative, avoiding the distortions embedded in society, stories shaped by implicit untruths. Summing up, this presentation has explored the implications of leadering with love and power. 1. Balancing the big and small picture in overarching debates. 2. Balancing personal preconceptions, organizational stories, and global narratives. 3. Balancing accepted views, alternative voices, and challenging ideas. 4. Whelming, balancing a vast learning curve and doing enough. 5. Balancing the legislative duty and a moral imperative. 6. Seeking a legitimate accountability. From a responsible business perspective, moving towards a community perspective with personal agency is a way of aligning love and power to sustainable development goals.